Hi there, welcome to this video when I'm going to be giving you my 7 top underrated Nikon Z camera settings. Thanks for joining me in this video, it's great to see you again. Now I quite often get asked questions about the settings that I use on my camera. Now I've got a Nikon Z8, but whatever Z camera you've got, or mostly if you've got a Nikon camera in general, the settings tend to be fairly similar and the menus fairly standard across all models. Now it might be slightly different if you've got anything other than a Nikon Z8, but you should find the functions are available on most cameras and the menus do seem quite similar. Now what I'm going to talk about in this video is the settings that I change straight away when I first get a new camera. Now I hardly even think about these, but they are very useful to my workflow. Then I'm also going to talk about some of the more advanced features that I think you should be aware of that will help you to take better photographs and mostly to enjoy your photography. I know what it's like when you get a new piece of equipment, you're really eager to try and make the most of it, but modern cameras today are a mass of buttons and the menus are really complicated, and so if you're new to photography or even just haven't had a new camera for quite a long while, then it can be very daunting to know how to find all the important things that you're looking for and then which ones you need to change that will help you to get better at photography. And that's what I'm aiming to do in this video, to help you to unlock the true potential of your photography by giving you some tips that are going to help you. The first thing I'm going to mention are two things that I change as soon as I take a new camera out of the box. One of them's fairly simple, but makes a big difference to the way that I use my camera, and the other one is something that I've done for a long while but I still think is very important. So we're going to start with just reversing the dials on the back of the camera, which might seem like a small point, but I'll demonstrate what I mean by that. At the moment I'm set in manual exposure, and you can see here from the exposure meter that this says that this image is overexposed. Now to correct this, I have to spin the dial to the right to bring that down to the correct exposure. Now at the moment the lights I'm using make this flicker, so I'm going to put that back to where it was to make it a little bit less annoying, but to do that I spin the dial to the left. Now this to me is counterintuitive, especially when you're looking through the viewfinder, because the exposure meter in the viewfinder is horizontal, and so when I move it to the left, the meter goes to the right, and when I move it to the right, the meter goes to the left, which seems absolutely counterintuitive. So there's a very simple way of fixing this. If you go into the menu and go to the F section, which is the controls, then here you can reverse the dial rotation, which is F5, and click on shutter speed and aperture. And then what this does is it means that when you then spin the dial to the left, the exposure decreases, and then when you spin it to the right, the exposure increases and you get a brighter photograph, and it's just so much more intuitive and it makes more sense to me. The next thing that I change straight out the box is to make sure that the back button focusing is set up properly. Now on the Nikon Z8 there is a button on the back of the camera that's dedicated for back button focusing, and if you haven't got that then you can usually assign a button for back button focusing as well. But there are a few things just to check in the menus to make sure that it works correctly. The first thing to do is to go into the menu and choose focus, which is in A, and then you go down to the AFC priority selection. And when the camera comes out of the box, it will probably be set on focus and release, which means that when you half press the shutter button, that will also focus. But what you want to do is turn that off, so the shutter button just controls the release. Now, if you've not assigned the back button to focus, then what you need to do is you need to then go into the button programming menu, which you can access through the I menu, and then find the AF button, which is just here. So you can scroll through the different buttons and program them all, which I'll talk a little bit more about later. But you want to make sure that that is set to AF on, which is autofocus on, and then you can use your back button to lock on the autofocus. If you've never tried back button focusing, I would really suggest giving it a go. Some people really like it and some people can't get on with it, but I've been using back button focusing now for over 10 years and I just could not go back to using the shutter release to focus. So basically what you do is you press the button on the back to lock onto your subject, and then you can just press the shutter button when you feel you want to take a photograph, but if you keep your finger on the back button, it remains focus locked, and you don't have to do that hovering in just the right position on the shutter button to make sure that you keep focus lock. So I just find it really useful. If you've not tried it, give it a go, and it does take a little bit of practice, but I think it's worthwhile in the end. The next thing that I want to talk about is autofocus optimization. Now, when you're out in the field, you want to be able to get the focus lock on your subject really quickly. There are lots of different area modes that you can use, which will help you in different situations. But you also want to change quickly between the different modes, because sometimes the subject is close, sometimes the subject is far away, sometimes it's moving quickly, and so different modes lock onto the subject better in different situations. You can see at the moment in the center of the screen is a big rectangle, and basically this is called a wide L box. So you can see just here the focus mode, which is wide L. By choosing this mode, what I'm doing is I'm telling the camera to base the area of focus within that box, so it limits the area that it looks at to make the focus. But I've also got a narrow box as well, which is a custom box, so you can change that to any size that you want. Then I've also got a 3D box that tracks the subject. I've got a full auto, and then I've also got a small box as well. Now I change between all of these by using the record button, because I don't use that obviously when I'm taking photographs. And the way that you assign that is if I go into the I menu and then choose the custom control, the record button is just here, and I've assigned that to cycle AF area mode. And then if you go into that menu again, you can choose which area mode you want to appear in that cycle as you press the record button. The other thing that I've done is I've assigned my function 1 button to a small single point, which is really useful, especially if there's a bird that's a very long distance away, and that is also set to AF on. So once I'm pressing that button, it's not only changed to a single point, but it's also put the autofocus on, so I can just press the shutter button and take the photograph. The other thing that might seem obvious, but you may not know this, if your autofocus point is off center, by pressing the OK button in the middle of the dial, it brings the focus point back to the center of the screen. As well as making sure that you're using the correct autofocus mode, it's also worth being sure that you're using the correct subject detection mode when you're using autofocus as well. So you can access this through the I menu. I've got here the AF mode and subject detection. If I press on that, then I bring up the AF mode on the top. but underneath is the subject detection. Now I pretty much always have this set to birds because that's what I'm predominantly photographing, but there is also the option to have animals, people, a automatic version, but there is also planes and cars as well. So there are lots of different options. So depending on what you're photographing, make sure you've chosen the right subject. The third point is a myth that I want to dispel. Now, I've often heard people say that you've got to come off auto to make yourself a better photographer, and this does have a little bit of truth to it, because if you rely completely on the camera's full automatic mode, then you are limiting some of the potential that you can get from the shots that you take. But most professional photographers, and certainly when I'm taking photographs, I very rarely have the camera in manual mode or a full manual mode, unless maybe I'm taking landscapes where things aren't moving quickly and I've got plenty of time to adjust the settings. If I'm taking something that could potentially be moving, or the lighting conditions could change dynamically, then I want some kind of automatic mode to help me get the best exposure. And the automatic mode that I tend to use is aperture priority. So this gives me a little bit of control over how the image will look, because I control the aperture and then the camera controls the rest, and I get a good exposure as well. Now, I personally don't use automatic ISO. It's just something that I've never got into, but you can set the ISO to automatic and then maybe just put a limit on how high the ISO is allowed to go, so you don't get really noisy photographs. My tip number 4 will be to start to program some of your buttons to make them more useful to your workflow. Now, I'm going to show you how I program my buttons, but that might not necessarily be what you find the most useful. Everybody has individual needs and preferences to how they work, so what I do might not necessarily be great for you, but you maybe be able to base your settings on what I do and then tweak them to suit your own needs. You access the menu by pressing the I button, which brings up the I menu, and then there is a custom button setting just here. So we're into the custom controls. Now you can get to that using F2 in the main menu, but this brings up this custom control menu. And now it is worth remembering that you can assign the buttons for shooting mode, and you can also assign the buttons for video mode. So as you change from shooting to video, all of the button placements change as well, which is really handy. I've already mentioned that I set function 1 on the front of the camera to AF on, but I've also set function 2 on the front of the camera to a playback mode. Now, I just find this useful to quickly be able to just view the image, particularly if I'm looking in the viewfinder, I can see what I've got, so that's very handy. I have also changed the function 3 button to bring up the release mode selector. Now, admittedly, this is only a few centimeters away from the dedicated button, but it's a difference of being able to use your thumb or your forefinger, so it just gives 2 options for changing that. The next thing is the jog wheel, which is just above the main dial, and I've set that to recall shooting functions, and basically what it does is you can choose lots of different options. So the option that I've chosen is the release mode, but it's burst mode of 15 frames per second. So if I've got a bird that I want to take in flight, I can just press the jog wheel and it will quickly put the camera into burst mode. there's a really great way of accessing your most regularly used functions, and that's through the I menu. And what's even better is you can completely customize what appears in the I menu. We access the I menu by pressing the I button, and this brings up all of the functions that I've assigned to these buttons. They're things that I want to get to fairly quickly, but if you want to change any of these, if you go into the menu and choose F for controls, you can customize the I menu by choosing one of the functions, and then you get a large list of things that you can assign that button to. And you can also do the same thing by going to the G section and choosing video, and G1 allows you to do the same thing for the I menu if you're in video mode. My next tip is aimed at landscape photographers who are getting frustrated by slightly blurry or out of focus images. Now this can be easily remedied by using a tripod, but also using the self-timer mode. Now on some cameras this is also called exposure delay, but it's not just for taking selfies and running around to the other side of the camera while the timer counts down. It can be really useful for taking landscapes or still lives and not introducing movement into the camera, because you set the timer and then by the time the shutter fires, your hands are completely free of the camera and the camera is stabilized. There are quite a few ways of doing this. You can either choose the release mode, which I've got set on a button, or you can go into the I menu, and here is the release mode as well. So at the moment it's set on a single shot, and then you just select the timer. Now the timer can be set to lots of different intervals from 2 seconds all the way up to 20 seconds, and what that does is it makes sure that when you press a shutter it will wait for a certain amount of time before it fires, which gives the camera time to settle. My final thing that I find very useful, and I did use it in my recent video where I took photographs of mushrooms, is the focus shift function. And basically what it does is it allows the camera to automatically take a series of photographs at different focal points, so you have different parts of the photograph in focus, and then what you can do is you can combine all of those photographs together in a photo stacking piece of software on a computer. I do have the focus shift function set up in the I menu because I use it fairly regularly, but if you haven't got that, then you can find it from the photo shooting menu. So if you scroll down nearly to the bottom, there is focus shift shooting. Now if you come over, there are quite a few different settings here, but basically you can choose the number of shots that it takes. You can choose the distance between the areas of focus, so the step between the two can be greater or smaller, but that's about all you really need to worry about. Everything else is how it was set up from factory. Then it is worth noting that the camera starts focusing in the foreground and the focus moves through the image to the back of whatever you're taking a photograph of. So you start by focusing in front of the image, and when you're ready you press start, and that then takes a series of photographs, and it means that you've got every part of the subject in focus. Well, I do hope you found that video useful, and I've really focused on the things that I do that I find useful, and I am aware that I haven't even scratched the surface of everything else that the camera will do, because I quite often get asked about pre-capture, for instance, and it's just something that I don't use. But if there is some kind of function that you want to find out more about, then let me know down below in the comments, and I'll try and do a video specifically about it. And when I feel a little bit more comfortable with pre-capture, then look out for that in the future. Well, if you have enjoyed that video, what I'll do is I'll link another one that you might enjoy just up here. You can also do me a really big favour by clicking the like, subscribe and the bell notifications. If you want to leave me any comments, do that down below, or visit my Instagram, Vero or Facebook account. But all that's left now is to say, stay safe and I'll see you soon.